Russian troops paraded through the streets of Moscow, celebrating the Soviet Union's defeat over Nazi Germany. Vladimir Putin marking the day, attempting to justify his war against Ukraine.
You know who's in Ukraine? Ukrainians, not Nazis. I mean, it was just a ridiculous claim. We heard pretty much the same out of Mr. Putin.
The military parade comes nearly 3 months into Russia's attacks. President Zelensky also linking his country's current fight to World War II, declaring Ukraine will celebrate 2 victory days. In a sign of ongoing support for Ukraine, President Biden signed off on efforts to revive a World War II-era weapons program.
The cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly.
Making it easier for the U.S. to lend or lease military equipment to Ukraine and Eastern European allies. This week, lawmakers are considering the president's urgent plea for $33 billion in additional aid for Ukraine.
Time is of the essence.
The administration and European leaders also unleashed new sanctions, targeting Russia's state-controlled media, placing further restrictions on Russian exports, and banning Russian oil imports. Still, there are no signs Russia is willing to relent.
Their only way out is to kill Russian soldiers and have the Russian army collapse.
Russian forces far from defeating Ukraine. President Zelensky vows his country will win. Despite concerns, Putin did not announce any escalation of attacks against Ukraine. There are fears he would use Victory Day to launch a new offensive. In Washington, I'm Bree Jackson for NBC News.